In the news this week, WA's top doctor fears for a COVID leak after immigration detainees moved from Sydney's red zones.
Afghan Australians are demanding further assistance as evacuation chaos continues in Kabul. New South Wales categorised as extreme risk as cases continue to stay high. Plus, Dr Andrew Miller's comment.
This is The Evening News with Ivan Leung and Sarah Smit.
Good evening. The Australian Medical Association in WA's dumbfounded immigration detainees were transferred from Sydney's COVID-19 hotspot to WA, calling it a severe health risk to the state during an exclusive interview this week. Reasons haven't been given for the move, and Premier Mark McGowan said he was not informed of the plan beforehand. Nelson Liu reports.
A decision puzzling WA's top doctor that's risking the health of the state. Immigration detainees quietly transferred from Sydney's COVID-19 hotspot to WA. They arrived at Northam's Yonge Hill detention facility without COVID infections, Premier Mark McGowan not informed of the move. The Australian Border Force has refused to answer questions, but in an exclusive interview, the Australian Medical Association's WA president says,
"Yeah, look, I'm dumbfounded.
He's concerned their arrival could spark a Delta variant outbreak in Perth.
We don't know their status, we don't know if they're vaccinated. Detainees actually get sick with COVID. Well, they're not going to stay there. They're now going to go into our tertiary hospitals, take up our tertiary beds and potentially be a point of entry."
But what's confusing him is a lack of knowledge about the transfer.
It just seems a really odd thing to do, to take them from detention in New South Wales to detention in Western Australia.
Back in April, WA Police Commissioner Chris Dawson signed the Yonge Hill immigration detainee COVID-19 directions, indicating so long as the Border Force follows the direction, WA officials don't need to be informed. The AMA WA says situations like this one are another good reason to get vaccinated.
Keeping a border up is not a long-term strategy to deal with COVID.
Now, though, concerns remain. WA's COVID-safe border could be compromised.
Well, it's got a massive hole, about the size of a 767 jet by the sound of it.
Nelson Liu, WAMN News.
Perth's Afghan community held a rally today urging the Australian government not to turn its back on their country and its people. Hundreds protested from Forest Chase to Parliament House, demanding more be done as the situation in Afghanistan continues to deteriorate. Helene, Fung reports.
Hundreds packed Forest Chase in Perth with strong demand from Afghan Australians urging extra effort to settle refugees and former assistance. As the situation in Afghanistan continues to deteriorate and more citizens are trapped from leaving, spokeswoman of the demonstration, Medina Dawfari, is urging WA Premier Mark McGowan to increase WA's share of Afghan refugee intake due to less COVID restrictions.
WA is in a capacity to increase its refugee intakes, and we would like to request the McGowan government to do so. It's an obligation that they have to do, for the people who are there, for the Afghans who are here. We are in this country because of the crisis that has happened in Afghanistan from 1996 to 2001, because of the same Taliban group who ruled back then. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here.
Protesters also want the federal government to increase national refugee intake and state government to provide housing for those in need.
Specific for the Afghan refugees, we want Australia. The government has said we cannot possibly bring every person who has helped the Allied forces in Afghanistan, the Australian Allied forces. We want Australia to expedite the people who have helped the Allied forces for them to evacuate and come here.
WA Green Senator Jordan Steele-John says additional 20,000 places should be allocated to Afghanis with temporary visas and the release of detainees into the community.
Well, I think what's really clear is that we need to see an additional 20,000 additional humanitarian spaces allocated immediately for people in Afghanistan. We also need to see the conversion of all temporary protection visas offered to Afghans to permanent protection visas, and we need to see the release of Afghans held in offshore detention. Well, the McGowan government needs to be working with the national government to make sure the communities here have the immediate support they need, and to ensure that anyone coming to WA from Afghanistan also gets the specialist services they need.
There are widespread concerns among WA's ethnic communities as to how will the federal and state governments handle these cases, along with the challenges of COVID-19 measures. Hundreds later marched onto the streets, wanting their voices to be heard. Helene Fung, WAMN News.
Premier Mark McGowan announced that based on growing risks from New South Wales, from 12:01 a.m. Thursday, 26th of August, New South Wales will be reclassified as an extreme risk category. He urged Western Australians to return home if they could, in an attempt to keep WA COVID-free. This comes just after the announcement that Greater Sydney's lockdown has been extended until the end of September, including a 9 p.m. curfew. Mr McGowan explained that this was not a category the WA government were assuming would need to be used for some time. The Premier also noted that a national plan was being developed to provide medical assistance in New South Wales hospital system from other states and territories.
COVID-19 vaccinations for FIFO workers in the regional community in WA's north will soon be available thanks to a planned vaccination blitz. The McGowan government and mining giant Rio Tinto will establish hubs at Perth Airport and mining locations in the Pilbara in a trial lasting 6 weeks. Discussions are underway with other mining companies to expand the trial, and the government says it'll help keep workers and the community safe.
Really pleased to announce the partnership today and really encourage both our workforce, but the community in general and across the Pilbara to get vaccinated as soon as possible.
WA's iconic cricket arena is finally receiving a facelift, with long-awaited upgrades beginning on the Wacker ground. Sod turning this week marked the start of the project in a $1.5 billion Perth City deal, which will feature accessible and inclusive designs celebrating WA's Indigenous culture and sporting history. The project is expected to ensure the long-term prosperity and livability of Perth, as well as economic, social and environmental sustainability.
Giving the Wacker a future, not just for 10 years, not for 50 years, for the next 100 years. And that means also having a real community benefit. And this whole Wacker redevelopment, if you've seen it, it's incredible. It brings benefit to young cricketers, it brings benefit to other sports, but it brings benefit to the community.
A confidential UN document has warned that the Taliban is searching for Afghans who worked for US or NATO forces before their withdrawal. According to the report, the group has prioritised the arrests of police, intelligence and military personnel from the previous administration. The document, released this week, indicates that militants are targeting the families of US support staff, despite promises of a general amnesty after the Taliban's takeover. Meanwhile, US President Joe Biden addressed the media as the evacuation chaos at Kabul airport continues. During a press conference, Mr Biden said the responsibility and burden lay with him. He also assured listeners that continual efforts will be made to evacuate American citizens trapped in Afghanistan.
But let me be clear. Any American who wants to come home, we will get you home. But make no mistake, this evacuation mission is dangerous. It involves risks to our armed forces, and it's being conducted under difficult circumstances. I cannot promise what the final outcome will be, or what it will be, that it will be without risk of loss. But as Commander-in-Chief, I can assure you that I will mobilize every resource necessary.
Education and Training Minister Sue Ellery announced that more than 400 WA public schools will benefit from a new $18.2 million primary school science program as part of the upcoming state budget. This will see classrooms at more than 130 schools upgraded into science laboratories to help deliver quality science, technology, engineering and mathematics education in all public schools. Upon completion of the classroom upgrade, these schools will receive $25,000 in resource grants, and 280 additional primary schools will receive $10.3 million worth of resource grants.
The jobs of the future are going to require the kind of skills and technical skills that students pick up in STEM as well, so it's really important for that too.
And speaking about STEM, when it comes to science classes, it never ceases to amaze us in high school, isn't it?
Absolutely. Someone set their hand on fire in one of my classes.
Oh, no.
Yeah, no, they coated their hand in methylated spirits and set it on fire, and only the methylated spirits burnt, not their hand, and their hand was completely unharmed.
But I know your true passion is biology, right?
I do like biology.
I found it. And now, here's AMAWA spokesperson Dr. Andrew Miller with his weekly COVID-19 update and commentary.
Hi, thanks for your time. Just a few words firstly about the terrible situation in New South Wales, both in Sydney and regionally now, unfortunately. More than 800 cases a day, spreading very rapidly in the Delta form, through the air, of course, as we know, so ventilation, masks, very important, not being around other human beings at all, very important. The fact that the outbreak is still growing shows that a few days ago the restrictions that were in place were not enough to keep it under control. And we know that the hospital system's already buckling, unfortunately, with around 95 people in the intensive care units and hundreds of people in hospital itself. So these people, even when they survive, will still go on to, in some cases, have long-term health problems. And really, this could have been prevented by getting vaccination out into the community before disease was allowed to spread on a very high level. Not this 80% of adults nonsense that they're talking about, which is only about 55% of the whole population. We need 80 or 90% of all people, including children, including very young children, to be vaccinated to prevent this nasty variant from spreading. And on the subject of children, we really need to urgently get these trials finished for Pfizer and Moderna. Pfizer done next month, Moderna in October. No biological reason to believe that we should not be vaccinating children. So as long as we can get a safe vaccine out there, we will prevent 1 in several thousand of them from dying, which is hundreds of funerals in WA that we can avoid. We will prevent 40% of them still having symptoms after 4 months, in some way interfering with their learning or sport and so on, and 7% going on to long COVID, which is the kids who, since the start of this pandemic, just have not recovered. And we can do better than that. Here in WA, if you didn't see my essay in the Sunday Times today, worth having a look at, and I would just encourage you all to stay the course, support zero spread of COVID in the community, so that we can be in a position to reach out to help others, such as our loved ones and so on in New South Wales and Victoria and around the country at the moment. We need to be supporting them by keeping a strong economy going here and as open a society as possible, whilst looking after the ones that we love very close to home. So hold out for those childhood vaccines. Don't listen to this idea that we can open up at less than 80 or 90% of everyone in the population, because we're Aussies, we don't leave people behind. Thanks for your time.
That's Dr. Andrew Miller, and here is Leo with what's coming up on 6 News tonight.
Thanks, Jonathan. On 6 News, breaking news. New South Wales COVID case numbers again rising in the past 24 hours, breaking the record amount Victoria saw last year. Greater Sydney now locked down until at least the end of next month as Premier Gladys Berejiklian introduces restrictions she previously said didn't work. Plus, Victoria back under a statewide lockdown as hundreds turn out to protest the new tough restrictions put in place for Metro Melbourne. Despite that, though, cases continue to rise from St Kilda to Shepparton. And more horrific images coming out of Afghanistan tonight as thousands try desperately to escape the country. We'll speak to 2 people about the developing situation, including someone who's in Kabul right now. You can see full details on those stories and plenty more by heading to our YouTube channel to search 6 News Australia to find us, or our website, 6newsau.com. For now, though, guys, it's back to you.
Thanks, Leo, and that's our weekly news and current affairs. We have the latest news on our website, wamnnews.com.au.
From Sarah and myself, we wish you good health, good night. See you next Sunday.
Take care.